Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Roshi. So we ask ourselves who we are as we begin this new year. I hope we're doing it every day. One of the famous images across traditions for us is, this mirror that reflects the light, if it's pure. We find it in Gregory of Nyssa, who's the rightly called the father of Christian mysticism in the 5th century, like a pool of water for reflecting the sun or a mirror. And it contrasts with this poem by Rumi, which I came across the other day. He's, with his divine lover, "You rest in my arms like a lute. I sing to you like a lover." But then he says, "You want to break this mirror? Take this stone." So he's inviting the lover, the absolute, to break his mirror. How do we understand that? Well, it certainly reminds me, perhaps you too, of the very famous story, the very famous koan for the 6th patriarch, Huineng. The Dharma duel he had where he got the transmission. And the head monk wrote this poem, you may recall. This is the 23rd koan in the Mamonkan. "The body is a Bodhi tree, and the mind a mirror bright. Wipe it carefully day by day, and let no dust alight." Yeah, so there you have the mirror. But Huineng comes along and says, his poem, "In Bodhi there is no tree, nor is there a mirror bright. In reality, there is no thing. Where can the dust alight?" And of course, he won the contest and he won the transmission. So the mirror and the mirror broken, or the mirror not existent. Because after all, if there's the mirror, then, it's separate, which is not true. And then you're only getting one perspective, wherever the mirror is pointed. So that can't be the thing. There's a very similar image, and you see it already when it's mentioning of the body is the Bodhi tree, the treatment of our being as a house, carefully constructed and all. John of the Cross, the great Christian mystic of the 16th century, in his poem on the Dark Night, says he went out from his house, but his house was now at rest, he said. "Estando yo mi casa sosegada." My house is quiet now. In other words, all my faculties are quiet. My house is there. But what happens? Is there a house? And what happens to that house? The poem at the very end of Upagupta's thing in the Denko Roku says, "House demolished, the person perished, neither inside nor outside. Where can body and mind hide their forms?" So it looks like the house doesn't have to just be quiet. Or the mirror wiped clean. The house has to be demolished. Bernadette Roberts should be more famous as a contemporary Christian mystic. She has tremendous writing. And she was looking for this notion. She writes about the no self from a Christian point of view. And she was looking for this in Buddhism, and for some reason she couldn't find it. But finally she says, "I came across 2 lines attributed to Buddha describing his enlightenment experience. Referring to self as a house, he said, 'All your rafters are broken now. The ridgepole is destroyed.' And there it was," she says. There could be no house and no self. It was as if an arrow launched at the beginning of time and suddenly hit a bullseye. These lines, she says, are not a piece of philosophy, but an experiential account. In the same verse, he says, "Again, a house thou shalt not build." If you want an even more rapidly uncompromising view of the house being destroyed, a couple of poems from Kabir, who's the great 15th century Hindu and Buddhist mystic in India. And he has some good things to say about this, even more strong. Listen to this one. I burned my house down. I'm standing with a flaming torch in my hand. I'll burn yours down too, if you join me on my march home. It's pretty astounding. Participating in our own wonderful destruction. From a slightly different point of view, he says, truth, that astute warrior shot and wounded me from my feet to my head. From outside, I seem whole. Inwardly, I'm torn to shreds. And finally, this most wickedly exuberant one from Kabir. Love's hurricane has come. The whirlwind of knowledge has arrived. My thatched roof of delusion has been flung to the four directions. My hut of illusion, so carefully crafted, has come careening down. Its two posts of duality have crashed to the ground. Its rafters of desire have been split by lightning. Thunderbolts have collapsed all its eaves of greed, smashed in a million pieces. So there is ultimate light, which can be compared to a mirror. The Book of Wisdom says that. But it's ultimate. So what is there when your mirror is broken and your house is pulled down, destroyed? Well, it reminds me of another koan from the Mamon Khan, number 8, Keichu's wheel, you might remember, where he makes wagons and carts, and the koan says, well, suppose you take away the wheels and take away the axles, and what's left? And he says, answer right away, but you're not getting it. And of course, the answer is everything's. There's the poem, Mumon's poem that goes with that Huineng koan that I just quoted is very telling in this regard. This is Mumon's poem, part of it. Stop trying to grasp it. There was nowhere to hide it. Shibayama's translation says there's nowhere to hide the true self, but it's just it. There really isn't a true self either. There's just no self. Anyway, the last verse is, when the universe is destroyed, or the world collapsed, another translation, it remains indestructible. So there is always it, which you are, the absolute, is that. But I think the important thing, a really important thing to remember for us, is that the shards remain. They're transfigured, if you like. They're transubstantiated, even if you want to use that word. But they're still there, and they're an important part of it. In other words, the shards, that's the way the Kabbalah refers to creation. In fact, the shards of the light, but they remain. They're reintegrated, but they remain as shards. And it's more beautiful, even more beautiful, because you don't just have the infinite, absolute brightness of the absolute light. You've got the mosaics and the stained glass windows and all the different shards that reflect in different ways. And they're still there. They're not your absolute identity, but they are you, and they do remain. The absolute relative and the absolute, the form and emptiness. They're, it's what the Tibetans mean by the rainbow body, for example. That these shards reflect the light in all different ways, but the absolute light is there, and it shines through them, but it shines through them. It's what Christians mean by the resurrection body, which remains there, reflecting the absolute light. And because they're in so many directions and so many colors, and so many broken pieces. They can reflect more and all in so many different ways. I think of Manjushri's, golden-haired lion with every hair reflecting of every hair, a golden light reflecting in every different direction, or Indra's jeweled net, which is the same image from Hinduism. But I want to emphasize especially that this is not just on the level of mind that gets broken up. You let go of the ideas and concepts and perspectives, which a single mirror would give. You let go, the house has to be at rest, with all your faculties, as St. John said. The brokenness is also of your heart, of your whole being. And it's an inescapable, as Buddha knew very well, and Christ knew very well, it's an inescapable part of human life. But it's not ultimately sad or a waste. It's what allows the light to shine in so many more beautiful ways. You have to be broken. Not just so the light can be pure, but so your heart can be pure. So reality can be opened up. And you can shine in that way in the world. It's the tears of things that Virgil spoke about. But there's a wonderful line, you all know it. I've always loved it, from Leonard Cohen. There's a crack in everything. All the mirrors are broken. There's a crack in everything. But that's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets. The light can't shine in any more beautiful way or any other way than through the broken mirror, through the broken heart. It's the pain of the whole world, which is taken up in the heart of Christ, in the Bodhisattva's heart, in the Buddha's heart, in our heart, which has to be broken, the pierced heart, in order for that light really to shine. So be glad you're a broken mirror. Be glad your house has been collapsed, because that's the only way the light can shine through in its most beautiful way. So I leave you with the second poem of Rumi, which I also came upon recently. He says, "In my own ruin, battered, ill, aghast, lost in my own ruin. Sometimes," he says, "I am weak enough to enter you." You being the it, or anything really, but to enter you, the lover. Sometimes I'm weak enough, not strong enough. That won't get you anywhere. The ego's strength and all of that. Your fallacious, strength doesn't fool anybody, I hope. I'm weak enough to enter you. It's what St. Paul says, when he finally learned his lesson. He says, it's when I'm weak that I'm strong. It's when I'm battered and broken and shattered that I'm awake and compassionate, which is the same thing. So I'll leave you with that. If you're feeling a little broken at the beginning of the year, give thanks.
Michael, the practical